So, speaking of magic, what a week. What a week it has been. I don't think I've been as exhausted and worried and exhausted with being worried in a long time as I was and am in the aftermath of the Orlando shootings. And it's weeks like this when I am most grateful to be part of a faith community and a faith movement that sustains and that lifts me up in times like that. A shout out to Chris Crass, the author and activist who wrote our reading from this morning. I got to hear him last year at General Assembly, and I'm looking forward to getting to go to his workshop again this year at GA, which I definitely encourage folks, if you're going to Ohio, to check that out. And either way, to read his essays and his books. They are a sublime inspiration on how one can do the work of activism and social justice making in a Unitarian Universalist context. I cannot recommend them highly enough. I realized researching this week that I've got something in common with the Lovin' Spoonful, which is that I believe in magic. Partly the dance until dawn kind that they sing about, and partly the robes and wands kind from Harry Potter, but mostly and most seriously the Starhawk neo-pagan feminist kind of magic. Her definition of magic is, quote, the art of changing consciousness at will. This is so powerful. The art of changing consciousness at will. And when we manage to bring our will to bear on the slow and difficult process of changing our consciousness, we are indeed creating a new and different reality, a new world via unseen forces, which is indeed, I believe, magic. I want to note that this is a process that works internally and can change one's life, and that when practiced externally, at best tends to be ineffective, and at worst can be spooky and manipulative, which I think is why magic culturally is so often associated with dark influences. It's something that part of the theme for looking at Harry Potter this morning will be that magic works its best when it is helping to shape us and how we see the world internally in our lives. So speaking of the Harry Potter books, I want to reassure folks that whether you have never read any of them or whether you went to the midnight release parties for the middle books in the series and threatened later to, in all seriousness, expel any summer camp students who spoiled book 7 for you when you were a counselor, there will be something here for you in the message this morning. Specifically, the messages that Harry Potter can teach us about building a liberatory movement are the following: the power of love, the importance of letting our light shine, the power of organizing for social justice, the importance of feminist leadership, and finally, how we can work to banish the voices of domination and oppression from our heads and from our movements. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the school that Harry Potter and his friends attend, is a meaningful place for me to get to spend some fantasy time in part because it reminds me of the place where I work now. If Hogwarts were UUCA, then Reverend McCarr would be Dumbledore, Michelle would be Professor McGonagall, Nanda would be Professor Sprout, and I would be Professor Trelawney. And back up to the surface from the deep dive, I promise. The central conflict in Harry Potter is between the forces of compassion and inclusion and the forces of strength and domination and the different factions in the wizarding world that prioritize each of these values. This brings us to the lesson about the power of love. There's an enduring image in the Harry Potter books of his mother, Lily Potter, standing between Harry as an infant and Lord Voldemort, the dark wizard who kills Harry's parents. Voldemort casts the Avada Kedavra killing spell first on Harry's father and then on his mother as she tries to protect infant Harry. But the power of her love and her desire to protect her child is so strong that when Voldemort turns and casts the killing spell on this seemingly helpless infant, it ricochets back on him and vanquishes him for years and years and sends him into hiding, leaving Harry unaffected except for a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. From then on, Harry and Voldemort are inextricably intertwined. They are connected throughout the series from that moment on. Just like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, we find out at the end of the Star Wars trilogy, have been connected the whole time. Or how Frodo and Sauron can see through each other's eyes at certain times when Frodo puts on the One Ring, or how Moses and the Pharaoh grew up together and then are separated but face off in the book of Exodus. So if Harry Potter is not the straw that stirs your drink, then think of these other fictional rivalries when we speak about the antagonist and the protagonist being inextricably connected. In Harry Potter, this means that he and Voldemort see into each other's thoughts at intense times in the book, and that Voldemort can plant words and images in Harry's head. And each time he does so, Harry gets angry and confused and fearful. He sees what Voldemort wants him to see and is made to be angry and fearful and confused by it, just like Voldemort wants. But each time, Harry comes back to his own thoughts and seeing the world through his own eyes, and the thing that helps him return to himself and to who he is the loving connections with his friends and those who he cares about in reality, in his own true world. That is what helps him to return to rejecting Voldemort's message of defeat and domination. May we all find those connections of friends and loved ones who help us to return to our own true selves when we feel angry and fearful and confused. I have a favorite spell in the Harry Potter books that I alluded to briefly before. Does anyone who's read the books want to guess what my favorite spell is? Say again? Accio. It is not Accio sermon, but good guess. Expecto Patronus. Yes, very good. 10 points to Gryffindor. Expecto Patronus is a spell that one casts and a silvery, shimmering animal made out of light comes out of your wand. Now, there are these really super evil prison guards in the Harry Potter books called Dementors, and they suck all of the happiness and the goodness and the good feelings out of the people that they're around, and they have the ability even to suck people's souls out of their mouths. It's called the Dementor's Kiss. And the best defense against these Dementors is to cast the spell Expecto Patronum and to have this silvery, shimmering animal made out of light come out of your wand, and it gets the Dementors to go away. And the way that you summon this spell is to think of a happy and joyous memory, something that generates a lot of happy energy and then helps you to create this animal made out of light that scares away the Dementors. And what this teaches me, I think, what this teaches us about organizing work is that when there are those moments or those encounters that just feel like they're sucking all of the happiness and all of the joy out of us, there is real power in having memories to turn to and having thoughts to turn to that sustain us and fill us with joy and happiness. And so if there's one thing that you take away from the sermon this morning, I hope it is to recall that one memory or that set of memories that no matter where you're at mentally, they always seem to fill you with joy and with happiness. And to make it a practice of thinking about them regularly and having them there to draw on when you are feeling like the happiness and the joy are getting sucked out of what you're doing and how you're feeling. The group of wizards that get together to fight Voldemort and his group, who are called the Death Eaters in the Harry Potter books, are known as the Order of the Phoenix. And they have a lot to teach us about building movements for social justice. We need in our movements entry points for new activists, new spiritual seekers, places where folks who are inspired can connect with a multi-generational community of experienced thinkers and activists so that when new people come to consciousness about feminism, anti-racism, economic justice, disability justice, queer liberation, and so on, they are adequately supported. The Order of the Phoenix was the way that new wizards were supported in the fight against the dark arts in Harry Potter. That's how Harry and his friends entered this fight. And UUCA can be a place in the real world for folks to enter into the fight for collective liberation, into the struggle for social justice. We have to know and to acknowledge that people will not always join this quest for collective liberation for the same reasons we do. But we must be nimble in accommodating a growing movement, just like the Order was nimble in accommodating folks that found their way in leading up to the final battle at Hogwarts in Harry Potter in ways that they didn't necessarily agree with or expect. I mentioned Harry and his friends Ron and Hermione. And let me tell you a little bit about Hermione Granger, who is a brilliant and passionate book nerd and probably one of my favorite fictional characters ever. Yeah, absolutely. Harry sees the fight against Voldemort as a personal quest, and in many ways, rightfully so. Again, Voldemort is the wizard who killed his parents. But Hermione puts it in the perspective of a collective fight. She's the one who initiates meetings of Dumbledore's army once Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster at Hogwarts, is removed from that post. She's the one who says, this is not just about Harry against Voldemort. This is about all of us against the forces of dark wizardry in the wizarding world. This is about us as witches and wizards coming together to be in this fight and support Harry and support the forces in the wizarding world that we want to have win. She is someone who comes into her leadership out of her status as an outsider. She's a Muggle-born. She gets called Mudblood by her classmates early on in the series. But she uses that outsider status to better understand how the system works and to oppose it more effectively. I love that. And she's a leader who learns. She starts at a certain point in the series a group called the SPEW, the Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW for short. But it fails because her efforts are without the house elves' input or participation or leadership. And she could have supported the voice of Dobby the house elf, but she doesn't. She misses that opportunity. She learns from it, though, and it helps her to grow as a leader, just as we all have the opportunities and the permission to get things wrong as leaders and to grow and learn from our mistakes. Eventually, she is the one who brings Dumbledore's army together by publicly confronting her fears during a meeting in a very vulnerable way, giving permission to other folks in this group to confront their fears privately, to know that, wow, if somebody as strong and as smart and dedicated as Hermione is struggling with these things, then I guess it's okay for me to struggle with them too and to work through them on my own personal journey. She is courageously vulnerable. Dumbledore's army itself, as a group, has a lot to teach us about organization, specifically the importance of trusting your fellow leaders, even and especially the unlikely ones. Luna Lovegood, for example, is a total weirdo, but she becomes an important source of information and insight and advice for Harry as the fight against the dark arts and against Voldemort goes along. Neville Longbottom seems nice enough, but mostly incompetent, but he is the one who keeps the fight going during its darkest hours and who overcame his parents' death, learning in the process that he could still survive and contribute when it mattered most. He ended up showing as much resiliency and toughness as anyone in the entire series. And let me tell you, if you want to organize in a Unitarian Universalist context, you better get used to working with weirdos and mistake makers. Not because it's a nice thing to do, but because it is truly necessary to acknowledge that we all have something to contribute. It's true that we all have something to contribute, and we need all of us in order to do this work well and to win. Finally, and most importantly, Harry Potter can teach us about rejecting Voldemort and Voldemort's voice and the voices of systems of oppression. This lesson came most forcefully to me about a decade after I began reading the Harry Potter books, actually. In 2009, some of you remember that summer, Henry Louis Gates Jr., a professor at Harvard University, was arrested in Cambridge, Massachusetts, while he was trying to get into his own house. He had left his keys and needed to get back in, so he was trying to break into his own house. But all that the Cambridge Police Department saw was an African-American man trying to force entry into a residence in the wealthy part of Cambridge, and they arrested him. It was supremely unjust. It was a shameful example of the injustices of our criminal justice system. But I remember in the aftermath, and even for weeks afterwards, thinking he should have found another way in. He should have remembered his keys, or called a locksmith, or left a key for himself, or called someone to let himself in. If he had just played the game, if he had just been better, he wouldn't have gotten arrested. This was the voice of Voldemort, the voice of systems of oppression in my head, saying that if you're just good enough, if you just play the game, then you won't get arrested, you won't be oppressed by our unjust criminal justice system. Luckily, at the time, I was attending a pluralistic divinity school, and I had the opportunity to hear again and again, it was necessary for me to hear many times from classmates who were Jewish or female or people of color or queer, affirming the experience of assumptions and mistreatment by law enforcement, no matter what, when they were interacting with them. These were folks who were grad students at Harvard who, if anyone knew how to play the game, if anyone knew the rules and how to follow them, it was these folks. But I had to trust their experience that when you are an outsider, There is no way to play the game and win. The game is rigged. It was obedience to a culture of white supremacy that was leading me to think that Dr. Gates was the one who had done something wrong, that if he had just played this rigged game a little bit better, that he would have been all right. It was the voice of Voldemort that would have me think that that is a solution to inequality and injustice in our world, that if everybody just plays the game, we'll be okay. That was the voice of Voldemort speaking to me in the aftermath of this event. And it was the voices of my classmates telling me to defy that voice, telling me to defy the voice of Voldemort, telling me that when you think compliance is the only way to be safe, remember the power of collective liberation and of loving one another deeply is actually the way to remain safe, that the hard work of rising up against systems of oppression, of creating a liberatory movement that resists those impulses to just go along with the existing culture of suppression and the culture of white supremacy. That is the voice of Voldemort. That is the voice of that system of oppression. And it was thanks to those conversations with my classmates and my friends that I learned to attempt to defy that voice and to have a counteraction in my head that says, I will not give in to you, Voldemort. I will not go along with your messages, system of oppression. And so my message to all of us is that when that voice says, that person of color or that queer person or that disabled person should have acquiesced and everything would have been all right, we are called to think, I defy you, Lord Voldemort, and I affirm the power of love and compassion and solidarity with all you would seek to oppress. Amen. So say it with me. Say, I defy you, Lord Voldemort. Defy you, Lord Voldemort. Again, I defy you, Lord Voldemort. Again, I defy you, Lord Voldemort. Once more, I defy you, Lord Voldemort. May we collectively affirm and promote the power of love and solidarity in all that we do and in all who we are. Peace, salam, shalom, and may it be so.